My job was to process fines, not fight corruption. But when the police chief's wife came to my window, a simple parking ticket ignited a war that would shake my city to its core. The smell of stale coffee and desperation is the official perfume of the municipal courthouse. For 10 years, I've been the guy behind the plexiglass barrier at the clerk's office, the one you see after you've already decided it's the worst day of your life. I handle fines, filings, and the endless stream of human frustration. I've been yelled at, cried on, and even had a box of live crickets dumped on my counter once. I thought I'd seen it all. Then Eleanor Rourke walked in, and I learned how wrong I was. She didn't walk. She glided, like the floor was unworthy of her expensive heels. Everything about her screamed money and power, from the perfectly tailored blazer to the enormous diamond that seemed to catch and weaponize the drab fluorescent lighting. The half-dozen people in line seemed to shrink as she passed, parting for her like the Red Sea. She came right to my window, bypassing a man who had been patiently waiting for 20 minutes, and slapped a parking ticket onto the counter. "This needs to disappear," she said. It wasn't a request. It was a royal decree. Her voice was low and smooth, but with an edge of pure steel. I picked up the ticket, my movements calm and practiced. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I can help you with that. You have 2 options. You can pay the fine, or you can request a court date to contest it." She stared at me as if I'd just started speaking in tongues. "Did you not hear me?" I said. "This needs to disappear. Erase it. Delete it from the system. I don't care what you have to do." I looked down at the ticket. The violation was for parking in a handicapped spot. The fine was $500. "Ma'am, I don't have the authority to do that. No one does. The ticket has been issued and filed. It has to be processed." A slow, dangerous smile spread across her lips. "Perhaps you don't understand who I am." She leaned closer to the slit in the plexiglass, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "My husband is Police Chief Robert Rourke. Does that clarify things for you?" A cold knot formed in my stomach. I knew who Chief Rourke was. Everyone in the city did. He was a hardliner, a man with a reputation for getting what he wanted, and he ran the police force with an iron fist. Dealing with his wife was like handling unexploded ordnance. "I understand who your husband is, Mrs. Rourke," I said, keeping my voice as level as I could. "But the law applies to everyone equally. Your options remain the same. Pay the fine or see the judge." Her face, which had been a mask of condescending amusement, hardened into something ugly. The smile vanished. Her eyes narrowed. "You're a brave little man, aren't you, Mr.—" She squinted to read my name tag. "Caprio. A little bureaucrat in a cheap shirt, thinking your little rules matter." She leaned in so close I could smell her expensive, suffocating perfume. "Let me be the one to clarify things for you," she hissed, her voice now a venomous whisper that sliced through the quiet hum of the office. "If this ticket isn't gone by the end of the day, I will make it my personal mission to ruin you. You think your job is secure. I will have you fired. You think you can find another one? I will make sure every potential employer in this state knows you as a troublemaker. I will dismantle your pathetic little life piece by piece until you are begging for scraps on the street. My husband is the law in this town, and you just made an enemy of his wife. Are we clear?" My mouth went dry. The entire room had gone silent. Every person in line, my co-workers in the cubicles behind me, they were all frozen, watching. She held my gaze for a long moment, a predator ensuring her prey understood it was already dead. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and glided out, leaving a trail of stunned silence and the lingering scent of her perfume. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then, my supervisor, a timid man named Dave, shuffled over. Just file the ticket, Caprio. Put it in the system. There's nothing else you can do." He looked at me with pity, as if I'd just been given a terminal diagnosis. I did as he said, my hands trembling slightly as I typed in the details. But as the fear began to subside, something else took its place. A slow, burning anger. She thought she could walk in here, threaten my entire existence, and face no consequences, all because of who she married. She was wrong. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words, the smug certainty in her eyes. The next morning I came to a decision. I wouldn't be her victim. I requested a copy of the security footage from the clerk's office, the one with clear audio that captured our entire exchange. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it, but I knew I couldn't let her threat stand. I felt a small flicker of hope, a sense that I wasn't completely powerless. That hope was extinguished the moment my cell phone rang that afternoon. I didn't recognize the number, but the caller ID made my blood run cold. "City Police Department. Chief's office." My heart hammered against my ribs as I hesitantly answered. A deep, cold voice on the other end spoke, each word a chip of ice. "Mr. Caprio, this is Chief Rourke. I think it's time you and I had a talk about your future." My hand was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone to my ear. "My future?" I echoed, my voice a pathetic squeak. That's right. Chief Rourke's voice was a low rumble, devoid of any emotion. It was far more terrifying than his wife's theatrical rage. This was the sound of cold, calculated power. "My office, in 1 hour. Don't be late." The line went dead before I could even respond. The next hour was a blur of cold sweat and a racing pulse. My supervisor, Dave, saw the look on my face and just nodded grimly, telling me to take as long as I needed. It felt less like permission and more like he was saying his goodbyes. The walk to the police headquarters was the longest 3 blocks of my life. Every police car that passed felt like an escort. Every officer on the street seemed to be staring at me. A man walking to his own execution. The chief's office was on the top floor, a corner suite with a panoramic view of the city he controlled. The walls were covered in plaques, awards, and photos of him with smiling politicians. It was a cathedral built to honor himself. He was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, not even looking up when I was shown in. He just gestured to the leather chair opposite him. I sat, feeling like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. For a full minute he said nothing, just continued signing a stack of documents. The silence was a weapon, designed to unnerve me, and it worked. Finally he capped his pen, folded his hands, and looked at me. His eyes were pale blue chips of ice. "Mr. Caprio," he began, his voice calm and reasonable. "I understand my wife paid you a visit yesterday. I want to apologize for her enthusiasm. She's a very passionate woman. She feels things very deeply, especially injustice." I just stared, unsure how to respond to this blatant lie. "She tells me there was a misunderstanding about a parking citation," he continued smoothly. "A simple clerical error, no doubt. These things happen. I trust that by now you've rectified it." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He was offering me an out, a chance to pretend yesterday never happened, to fall in line and be a good little drone. But looking at his smug, confident face, all I could see was his wife's sneer. All I could hear was her promise to dismantle my life. The fear was still there, but the anger was burning brighter. "There was no misunderstanding, Chief Rourke," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Your wife was issued a citation for parking in a handicapped space. She was given the same 2 options as any other citizen: pay the fine or contest it in court." The chief's smile didn't falter, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I see. You're a stickler for the rules, Mr. Caprio. I can appreciate that. It's an admirable quality in a public servant. But sometimes a little discretion is required to ensure the smooth operation of our city's services. A little professional courtesy. Parking in a spot reserved for someone with a disability isn't a matter of professional courtesy," I said, my courage fueled by pure indignation. "It's a matter of the law." He leaned back in his chair, the picture of patience, but a muscle was twitching in his jaw. "The law is a complex thing, son. It's not just black and white words in a book. It's about people. It's about maintaining order. A man in your position, a clerk, you see one tiny piece of the puzzle. A man in my position, I see the whole board. And I'm telling you, for the good of everyone, this particular puzzle piece needs to be put back in the box." His voice dropped lower. "This city can be a dangerous place. Lots of moving parts. Accidents happen every day. Good people, people who are just trying to do their jobs, can find themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. A fender bender. A misunderstanding in a dark alley. It would be a tragedy for a dedicated public servant like you to have his life disrupted. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" It was no longer a veiled threat. It was a promise, delivered with the chilling calm of a man who had no doubt he could follow through on it. My heart was a jackhammer, but I knew in that moment I couldn't back down. If I did, I'd be their pawn for the rest of my life. "I understand completely," I said, standing up. My legs felt like jelly. "The ticket is in the system. Mrs. Rourke will receive a summons with her court date in the mail." I turned and walked out of his office, not waiting for a dismissal. I could feel his icy gaze burning into my back with every step. I didn't breathe until I was out of the building and back on the street. The war had been declared. Back at the courthouse, I pulled up Eleanor Rourke's file. I knew every judge on the roster. Most were reasonable, a few were pushovers. But there was one who was a legend, Judge Michael Thompson. a 68-year-old jurist with zero patience for bullies, corruption, or anyone who thought they were above the law. He was my only shot. I assigned the case to his courtroom, printed the summons, and put it in the outgoing mail myself. I went home that evening completely drained, a bundle of raw nerves. I kept looking over my shoulder, seeing police cars in my rearview mirror. I locked my apartment door, double and triple checking the deadbolt. I knew this wasn't over, but I didn't expect them to move so fast, or so personally. As I walked into my kitchen to get a glass of water, my blood ran cold. Everything was neat, exactly as I'd left it. Except for one thing, sitting perfectly in the center of my small kitchen table was a single piece of paper. It was a parking ticket. Not a copy of the one Eleanor had, but a brand new one issued by the city police. It was made out to my car, my license plate, and under the listed violation, one phrase was typed in bold capital letters: obstruction of justice. They had been in my home. A wave of cold dread washed over me, so intense it made me dizzy. They had been in my apartment, my locked apartment. The message wasn't just a threat anymore, it was a demonstration. They could get to me anywhere, anytime. My sanctuary had been violated. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth, my eyes darting around the room, searching for any other sign of their presence. But there was nothing. Just that single, stark, white piece of paper on my table. A flag planted by an invading army. I spent the rest of the night in a paranoid haze, jumping at every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren. I didn't sleep. How could I? I felt like a hunted animal. The ticket was absurd, of course. Obstruction of justice wasn't a parking violation. It was a fabrication, a piece of psychological warfare designed to break me before I even set foot in the courtroom. By morning, I was a wreck, but my fear had curdled into a hard, cold resolve. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. I had one card left to play. I called the local news station, Channel 8. I spoke to an investigative reporter named Sarah Jenkins. I'd seen her work. She had a reputation for being fearless and tenacious. I told her I had a story about abuse of power at the highest levels of city government. I told her I had evidence. We agreed to meet. The meeting took place in a noisy coffee shop, the last place anyone would expect a clandestine exchange. I handed her a flash drive. On it was the security footage from the clerk's office, a crystal-clear recording of Eleanor Rourke's threats. I also gave her a copy of the bogus ticket they had left in my apartment. Sarah's eyes widened as she watched the footage on her laptop, listening through her headphones. When it was over, she looked at me, a grim smile on her face. "Mr. Caprio," she said, "you've just handed me the story of the year." For the next week, a fragile sense of calm settled over me. I went to work, did my job, and tried to act normal, all while knowing a storm was about to break. I knew the Rourkes wouldn't make another move until the court date. They were arrogant. They believed they still controlled the narrative. They had no idea the ground was about to crumble beneath their feet. The day of the hearing arrived. The courtroom was buzzing, but not just with the usual hum of municipal justice. Sarah Jenkins and her camera crew were set up in the back. Their presence seemed to make people nervous. I saw Eleanor Rourke sweep in, flanked by a high-priced lawyer who looked like he'd been carved from marble. She spotted me sitting in the public gallery and shot me a look of pure venom, a silent promise of the retribution to come. Her husband, the chief, wasn't there. He was too important, too insulated to appear for something so trivial. Or so he thought. Judge Thompson entered, his stern face a mask of judicial neutrality. He called the case. The city versus Eleanor Rourke. Her lawyer stood up, oozing confidence. "Your Honor, we move to dismiss. This is a frivolous citation, a clear case of a disgruntled city employee harassing a private citizen. We believe Mr. Caprio, the clerk who filed this, has a personal vendetta against my client." Judge Thompson looked down from the bench, his gaze unreadable behind his spectacles. He looked over at me, then back at the lawyer. "A vendetta, you say? Mr. Caprio, would you care to approach the witness stand?" My heart leaped into my throat. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was just an observer. I shakily made my way to the stand and was sworn in. The lawyer circled me like a shark. "Mr. Caprio, isn't it true that you had a contentious conversation with my client? Isn't it true that you were unprofessional and rude, and that this ticket is your way of getting back at her?" "No, sir, that's not true," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Your Honor," the lawyer said with a dismissive wave. "He said, she said. There's no evidence. This case is wasting the court's time." Judge Thompson stared at the lawyer for a long moment. "No evidence, you say?" He then looked directly at Sarah Jenkins in the back of the courtroom. Ms. Jenkins, I believe you have something you wish to submit to the court as evidence in this matter. Something delivered to you by an anonymous source? The lawyer's smug expression dissolved into confusion. Eleanor Rourke looked bewildered. Sarah Jenkins stood up, a grimly triumphant look on her face, and nodded to her cameraman. He pressed a button. The large television screens on the courtroom walls, normally used for displaying evidence, flickered to life. And there it was, for the entire courtroom to see, the security footage. Eleanor Rourke's perfectly made-up face filled the screen, and then her voice, clear as a bell, echoed through the silent room. I will dismantle your pathetic little life, piece by piece. The color drained from Eleanor's face. Her lawyer stood frozen, his mouth agape. The whole room was transfixed, watching the ugly threats unfold. When the video ended, a deafening silence filled the courtroom. Every eye was on Eleanor Rourke. Judge Thompson let the silence hang for a full 30 seconds. Then he looked down at her, his expression now one of cold, unadulterated fury. Mrs. Rourke, he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of an earthquake. It seems we have more to discuss than just a simple parking ticket. He banged his gavel, the sound cracking through the tension like a gunshot. I am finding you in contempt of court for attempting to intimidate a court officer. Bailiffs, take the defendant into custody. We will reconvene this afternoon to discuss your sentencing. 2 bailiffs moved towards a stunned Eleanor, but before they could reach her, the courtroom doors burst open. Standing there, his face a thundercloud of rage, was Police Chief Robert Rourke. He wasn't in his dress uniform. He was in full tactical gear, flanked by 2 armed officers from the city's SWAT team. The entire courtroom gasped. It was an image of pure, naked intimidation. A police chief, armed and in tactical gear, storming a hall of justice to intervene in his wife's case. It was an act so brazen, so beyond the pale, that for a moment everyone was too shocked to move. The bailiffs froze, their hands hovering near their sidearms, caught between the judge's order and the city's top cop. Chief Rourke's eyes scanned the room, ignoring everyone until they landed on Judge Thompson. Your Honor, he boomed, his voice a weaponized display of authority. There seems to be a serious misunderstanding here. This is a security matter. I'm taking my wife into protective custody. Judge Thompson, however, didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He simply leaned forward into his microphone, his gaze as hard as the granite of the bench itself. Chief Rourke, he said, his tone deceptively mild, are you attempting to obstruct a court proceeding? In my courtroom? While in possession of a firearm? The air crackled with tension. The 2 men, pillars of the city's justice system, were locked in a standoff. Rourke had the guns, but Thompson had the law, and in this room the law was absolute. This is a circus, Rourke spat, gesturing toward the news cameras, which were now broadcasting this incredible scene live across the city. My wife has been tried and convicted by the media. I won't allow her to be railroaded. Your wife, the judge countered, his voice rising with controlled fury, was tried and convicted by her own words on that screen for everyone to see. And you, sir, have just committed a felony in front of a dozen witnesses and a live television audience. You are a disgrace to your uniform and an enemy of the justice you swore an oath to uphold. Judge Thompson then did something I'd never seen in my 10 years at the courthouse. He looked past Rourke to the 2 SWAT officers flanking him. They were young men, their faces masked, but their eyes were wide with uncertainty. Officers, the judge's voice rang out, clear and commanding. Look at me. You swore an oath. Was that oath to this city and its laws, or was it to the man standing beside you? You have a choice to make right now. Uphold your oath, or become a co-conspirator in his crimes. Arrest your chief. For a heart-stopping second, nobody moved. Chief Rourke let out a short, incredulous laugh, but the laugh died in his throat as he saw the hesitation in his men's eyes. He had overplayed his hand. He had assumed their loyalty to him superseded their loyalty to the law, and he was wrong. One of the officers slowly, deliberately raised his weapon, not at the judge, but at his own chief. The other officer followed suit. Robert Rourke, the first officer said, his voice trembling but firm, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and brandishing a weapon in a federal building. Put your hands behind your back. The chief's face contorted with a mixture of disbelief and pure rage. He looked from his men, to the judge, to his now sobbing wife, and finally, his venomous gaze landed on me. He had lost. In front of the whole city, he had been utterly and completely defeated. He slowly, stiffly, placed his hands behind his back. As the bailiffs cuffed him and his wife, the courtroom erupted in a low murmur of astonishment. When court reconvened, it was a formality. Judge Thompson delivered a sentence that would be talked about for decades. Eleanor Rourke was given the maximum penalty for contempt and attempted coercion, 6 months in the county jail and a $10,000 fine. She was also ordered to perform 500 hours of community service, specifically working with organizations that support the disabled. For Chief Robert Rourke, the punishment was far more severe. The judge, citing the overwhelming evidence of his abuse of power, including the falsified ticket he had planted in my home, recommended the case be turned over to the district attorney for immediate prosecution on multiple felony charges. He was denied bail. His career was over. His freedom was forfeit. The story was front-page news for weeks. The video went viral. The city council launched a massive investigation into the police department, uncovering a deep-seated culture of corruption that Rourke had fostered. It was a cleansing fire, and it all started with a single parking ticket. As for me, I became something of a local hero. Caprio the clerk, the little guy who stood up to the bullies. The city offered me a promotion, a raise, even my own office. I politely declined. I liked my window. I liked being on the front lines, helping regular people navigate a system that can often feel overwhelming. My life didn't need to be dismantled. It was perfectly fine just the way it was. Sometimes when a particularly arrogant person comes to my window, trying to use their name or position to get out of a fine, I just smile. I lean forward and tell them a story about a police chief's wife who thought the rules didn't apply to her. It's amazing how quickly they decide to just pay the ticket.